afternoon. We're going to welcome our guest, Jordan Davis. Here in a minute, he just gave a really good talk to the students in the Heminger, and believe it or not, they were engaged and they asked questions at the end. Not just one or two, they asked lots of questions. So we were pretty pleased with that. So I'll tell you a little bit about Jordan. Jordan H. Davis is an educator, writer, consultant, and international speaker who specializes in inclusive teaching and student success. He is the founder of JD Speaks, LLC, an educational development company through which he helps schools, universities, and national organizations deliver engaging curriculum for learners. Since 2019, JD has worked with over 25,000 students, educators, professional staff, and school leaders, ranging from intimate workshops to keynotes for some of the world's largest education organizations. He holds a master's degree in learning, design, and technology from Georgetown University and a bachelor's degree in communication from McDaniel College. Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, Jordan is a huge Ravens fan. You might have to forgive him for that.
I feel the Bengals and Browns hate just like that.
Also a lover of crab cakes and has been a proud lifelong DMV resident. So join me in welcoming Jordan Davis.
All right, thanks so much, Stacy. Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all feeling? Feeling pretty good? I was heartened when I came in and I saw you all talking to each other, because in doing a lot of faculty development work, professors don't sit down at tables and just talk amongst each other very often, and so even for me, that was a good sight to see. I was actually so excited to see you all today that when I flew in from Baltimore yesterday, I briskly walked to the baggage claim. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm gonna grab my bags, I'm gonna drive to Tiffin, and then I stop in my tracks. I'm like, I left my carry-on bag in the overhead bin on the plane. You should have seen me run through Detroit Wayne like Jason Bourne, trying to get that bag back. And I still don't have it. I still do not have it. They probably are going to, hopefully they send it to Lost and Found so I can pick that up today, because I'm heading out today. But I say all that to say, I had some really cool stuff in there. I had like 1 million business cards and like wristbands and like some cool stuff for you all. I was able to gather up a few business cards and then some pens. If you need a pen, there are like 70 of them over there. Please feel free to grab one. They're very shiny. And I'm excited to be with you all today, and I want to dive into it. But before we start, this is not a seminar. I want you to free your body, because usually when I do this work with faculty, they like to cross their legs and sit like this for 75 minutes, right? So I want you to kind of get loose. There's going to be an opportunity to talk to each other around midway through. It's sort of like a check-in thing, and then we'll have a discussion after. Also, if you have to cough, just cough. Like, don't try to hold it in like, I don't want to mess Jordan up. Like, cough, sneeze, do whatever you need to, excuse yourself. Also, feel free to take notes. You will have the opportunity to see the slides after, because I'll have you all submit like a quick just feedback survey to try to improve my work, and so I can kind of see how you all were vibing with things. At the end, you'll share your email if you'd like to, and then I can send you the slides after. So feel free to take photos, take your own notes, and we can go ahead and dive into it. So I want to do some storytelling to set context for why I've titled the keynote what I've titled it, which is Pedagogical Excellence in the Modern Academy, Wellness, Equity, and Technology as the new core. And as you all probably looked at that title of the talk, maybe at 11:49 p.m. last night as you're kind of scrolling through your email, and you might have thought that was a typo, because we usually don't see these three topics discussed in the same room at the same time. We have our AI workshops that are literally everywhere. We have our inclusive teaching workshops, stuff on student well-being and wellness resources. And then we have our diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions that are obviously now being attacked in a lot of places, right? And usually those things are siloed and separated, but I'm actually going to show how they're not just connected, but there's actually a sequence in which we should be thinking about these areas of our teaching. Hopefully through this talk I can make that clear to you all today. You see one of my favorite desserts of all time in the middle. I love my mom's banana pudding. I like to analogize my speech as banana pudding, because there's going to be a lot of theory in here, right? Like I saved the more specific AI applications, technological stuff for like the Jose Antonio Bowens and like the Brian Alexanders and like all of the AI whizzes. And I can do a little bit of that, but really I want to set like a cultural tone with you all today, because I really feel like that's the crux of this work. And so that's the pudding part, is the theory. And throughout there's going to be these little vanilla wafers, which I like to call the practices, right? Stuff that you can put in your pocket. You can be like, okay, maybe I should try that in my class next week. Or maybe it's something that you can design for fall 2025, right? So I'm going to try to strike that balance. If I lean into one area too heavily and compromise with the other, call me out on it, let me know, we can discuss it, and there's going to be a brief discussion at the end for us to kind of surface our ideas and kind of see how we're thinking about these things. Okay, let's keep moving. So I want to start with this scenario. This happened about 2 years ago at a prestigious law school on the East Coast of the United States. And this involved a law and social change course for first-year law students. And in this course, instead of having traditional, midterm exam or, quarter way through the semester exam, they have these projects. And these projects are cases, because these are all legal students. And so for this particular class, there was a case that the professor proposed to the students, and the students are assigned to these cases. And in this particular case, it was a class action lawsuit against the State Association of Student Athletes for allowing transgender athletes to compete in women's swimming. Right, so that was the case. And so there's two students that were assigned to the plaintiff side, the folks who were suing the State Association, and then there were two students who were the defense. And there were two transgender students in this class. It's a class of about 60 or so first-year law school students. Not only did the professor of this law and social change course intentionally assign the transgender students, the only two in the class, to this case, but they actually made those students take the role of the plaintiff. So students were required, these two transgender students, to advocate a perspective that flew in the face of their humanity and right to exist. And you might be thinking, why would a faculty member do something like that? And so the students, they not only just took on the project and did all the research and formed the arguments, but they actually had to put on almost like a mini trial for 10 minutes. And then they had to do this in front of all of their students. By the end of all their classmates, by the end of the presentation, the 10 minutes, both students were in tears. Other students were in tears. This was a complete disaster. Faculty member realizes that this is a disaster, and she comes back the next week and apologizes to the students, and there's this whole intervention. The two transgender students, before they got up to present, went to this professor during office hours and said, "This is making us deeply uncomfortable. Like, this is something that is literally keeping us up at night. I don't know if we can take this on." And the professor said, "No, like, this is a learning goal that I have for you all, and you will learn to advocate for the perspective of those, or from the perspective of those with whom you do not agree with." Right? Like, that was the rationale. It's like, I want you to practice advocating for thoughts that aren't yours, because that makes your advocacy stronger. But at the same time, you're literally traumatizing students in front of all of their classmates. And so this story that obviously is very real, that I presented to you all, is why I do the work that I do. I do a lot of stuff around inclusive teaching, trauma-informed teaching. I lead workshops on this. I do it not only in higher ed, but also in K through 12. And as I'm doing this work at these conferences, because I go to these teaching and learning conferences all over the country, I'm done giving my trauma-informed teaching workshop. Faculty have really strong thoughts on this example and others that I give, and we talk about it and we equip each other with practices. After I pack up my things and I leave that workshop room, I peek around the corner and I say, what are they talking about in that AI workshop? Maybe I should sit in there for a little bit. And so I do. I take my seat, I sit in the back, not really talking to anybody, just kind of observing what's happening in the room, how folks are talking about AI. And usually I hear a few things, right? And this isn't only true for the in-person workshops that I sit in, on education technology, but also the virtual ones. By a show of hands, who has been asked any of these questions in the past 6 months? 6 months you've been asked this question. Okay, basically everyone in the room, right? How often are you using AI? What's your comfort level with it? Like, these are the types of questions that usually start these education technology workshops. And then the presenters, they're super enthusiastic. They tell you about these tools that are going to completely change the way you teach. It's going to change the way that your students learn. And then there's a little bit of Q&A at the end, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A. And I'm locked into the Q&A because I'm curious to see what faculty are going to say in response to these brand new tools, many of whom have never used AI before in their lives. Most of the feedback is positive. Faculty have really thoughtful questions. But then always, in like the last 2 minutes, it's literally like the last 2 minutes of the session, there's a faculty member, a brave soul, who raises their hand and says, but aren't students using this to cheat? Like, what? My students are cheating with AI. And I'm thinking about banning it. So what can I do about that? There's no time to dig into it. That's not what the session was about. They receive a general answer from the facilitator about what to do that isn't that helpful or that specific, and then everyone goes off on their way. 98% of the folks in the room were super positive. Yay, let's do this thing. And then there was the brave soul, along with maybe a few others who might have raised their hand and said, I don't know about this AI thing. I don't use it. My class has been fine, and my students aren't really using it like that. And if they are using it, they're not using it for learning, right? They're using it maybe for nefarious reasons. And I wanted to start with these two stories that seem like they have nothing in common because they're actually very connected. Because if we were to take these two faculty members, for example, by the way, these are AI-generated faculty. These are not real headshots from faculty. I don't want anybody to get weirded out by that. This was created by Canva's Dream Lab. So Canva has an AI photo generator, and this is pretty good. I just said, give me a split photo of two faculty members for me to use on a slide that I'm giving in Keynote, and it came up with this, right? So we've got Susan on the left, who's our legal faculty member teaching this law and social change class, again, very fictitious. And then we've got Tasha, who is in the AI workshop raising her hand about academic integrity in relation to AI. Their stories are actually intertwined because the reason why they have questions, it comes from the same source. It's that they're unwilling to embrace alternative paths to reach learning goals in fear of compromising merit and academic rigor. If you were to ask that legal faculty member, why did you put those students in such a vulnerable, in such an anxiety-inducing, in such a dehumanizing situation? The answer would be, I have my learning goals for my course. I'm a thought leader. I'm an expert in this. I've been in this field for 20 years. This is what works in the field. This is how you create strong advocates. And I know a thing that my students don't know, and I need them to trust me in how they pursue that learning goal, without being open to alternative ways to go about that goal that don't require them to be humiliated in front of their classmates. If you were to ask Tasha the same question, Tasha, why are you banning AI in your class? Because I have learning goals that have nothing to do with AI, and if students are using technology to reach those learning goals, it's not them that's doing the work, it's the technology that's doing the work. Therefore, I'm not going to allow it in my class. So the crux of the argument, the heart of it, it's the same. It's our perceptions of what merit means, of what academic rigor means, and we feel as though if students are advocating for alternative ways to reach our learning goals in our courses, that it's not academically rigorous, that they're taking the easy way out, that they're trying to subvert the system that we've kind of set up around our learning, and they're not really trusting our expertise in it. And so this is what I want to dive into today.
What if you change rigor to integrity?
Compromise merit and academic integrity. I think one is connected to the other, right? Because integrity leads to rigor. If you cheated on an assignment, you're not using your academic intellect to rigorously engage with it, right? Someone is doing the work for you. So I think those are connected. I would love to hear more about where that question came from for you, or even others who wanted to chime in there. But yeah, thank you for bringing that in. I don't know if you want to respond to that. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, there will be plenty of time to discuss. I appreciate it. But yeah, keep that going, right? If you have questions throughout, raise your hands. I appreciate you, adding that in. And so in my work with faculty, I use some emojis to kind of illustrate this. As AI starts to proliferate, and education technology starts to proliferate along with it, when we talk about AI checkers, when we talk about different learning apps that students might be using to study and complete assignments, we think that we should think about those things more, right? So we need more training on AI. We need to go to the workshops and the webinars and listen to the panels and design our whole conference around AI. And there's a ton of organizations that are doing some great work around it. I'm not downplaying that work. But what if, instead of thinking about AI in response to AI, we think about the other aspects of our course that surround the AI conversation, so that when students use it, they're compelled to use it responsibly. So that when students use it, they're using it toward assignments that are culturally relevant, assignments that speak to their lives outside of the classroom, assignments that teach them how to learn, and not just about the topics that we want them to learn about, so that we're eliminating the reasons for why students are cheating in the first place. Because AI didn't create cheating. It just brought it to their doorstep. It made it more convenient. AI is like the DoorDash for cheating. Like, it made it, students can get to it in a matter of seconds, literally. But the cheating always existed. Academic integrity has always been a challenge in higher ed. It's just coming to a head because it's so easy, it's so ubiquitous, it's so woven now into even the cultural fabric of our society. We talk about AI. My grandmother's talking about AI. I'm like, how's she get in an AI conversation? Right? So it's among us, it's everywhere. So students are thinking about it, but how can we not just think about AI, not just sign up for the AI workshop, but sign up for the trauma-informed teaching workshop, sign up for the ungrading workshop, sign up for the assessment design workshop, so that the other aspects of our course are strengthened, so that when students turn the tools, they feel motivated and also equipped to use them responsibly. Can I get some slow head nods for folks who are vibing with this so far? Like, is this making sense to some people? Okay, not everybody, but I'm gonna connect the dots soon. That's fine. That's fine. I appreciate the honesty. Okay. We're expecting our students to do things they've never been taught to do. I was made aware that Sandy McGuire was on campus not too long ago. Who attended that talk from Sandy McGuire? Okay, a lot of people, right? She talked a lot about metacognition, teaching students how to learn. Students are, frankly, never taught how to learn. Most of them aren't. They figure out their own systems for studying that work for them, that leads them to earn good grades, but is that actually translating to replicable skills that they can take outside of the classroom and apply after graduation? For a lot of those students, the answer is no. And the reason why I have this example is because I think about myself. I just spoke to a wonderful group of students, as Stacy mentioned, about my college football career. And it makes me think about how people ask me all the time, Jordan, how do you stay motivated to go to the gym? Like, I love, being in the gym and, lifting weights and running and things like that. Aside from the fact that I grew up playing football and I had to navigate my own fat phobia in relation to my body and the body dysmorphia that I face and all these other things that kind of influence my ideas about working out and fitness. It's the simple fact that someone taught me how to bench press when I was 13 years old as a freshman in high school. I took an elective weightlifting class, and I learned how to bench press in an environment that was safe, that was in a group environment, so I didn't feel like I was alone or that I was singled out. I had an amazing teacher of this weightlifting class who was really responsive to even the different goals and the body types of the students that were in the room, just very respectful and patient. This was my experience. Maybe students felt differently about it that I was in that class with. But it was really it was such a supportive environment for me to learn how to bench press as an entry point into my athletic career. And if I were able to, connect the dots for this analogy, if weightlifting is to strength what learning skills are to academic success, we've never taught our students how to bench press, but we expect them to perform at a high level. We expect them to be strong. All right, we're asking them not to use AI when they're exhausted in their learning, when they're frustrated in their learning, when they're grieving. A lot of them are suffering from anxiety and depression. When a lot of them are taking required courses that are in the general ed curriculum that they don't want to take, right? Like all of these forces, when they don't feel confident in themselves as learners, when their language or their accent has even been critiqued by former educators, when they come from high schools where literally, I spoke to a community college professor about 3 weeks ago. He's been struggling all semester to get his students to talk. And then he finally asked, he said, well, what's going on here? It's week 6. I've had this thoughtfully designed kind of layout and syllabus for the semester, but you all aren't asking any questions. Why is that? Student raised their hand and says, the high school that we come from, because it's a community college, so basically all the students in the class come from the same school district. The high schools that we come from, asking questions is frowned upon. They don't want us to ask questions because it's getting in the way of the content coverage. We've got this standardized test that we need to get to, and they don't appreciate our questions anyway when they ask them. Right, so these are the things that students have to battle. I just named like 8 different challenges that might be contributing to students using AI irresponsibly. And so we're expecting them to use it responsibly when, one, they haven't even been introduced to the tools, and when they find out about it, they're finding out about it from their peers and learning about how their peers are using it, and they see it as a quick solution to the challenges that they're solving. My plea to you is, how do we just remove the challenges in the first place? Where are the challenges coming from? How can we reach into those and shift those so that students have less reasons on which to rely on AI? And if we don't solve this problem, at least getting down to the bottom of where academic integrity is failing, we will be in this cycle forever, this constant cycle of a new technology is introduced. Students figure out, well, a new technology is introduced and it's moving so quickly that we have to ban it to figure it out. ChatGPT bursts on the scene. A lot of faculty like, nope, we're not doing this because I don't know anything about it yet. We need to pause. A lot of universities had the same mindset. Let's pause, let's assess, let's figure out how to support students around it. Then students find a way to subvert those systems. They're very smart, they're very technologically savvy, more so than we are. So they figure out ways around it. And then institutions and even individual faculty have a choice to make. Do we embrace the technology, or do we continue to fight students on it? Do we go tit for tat with our students? They figure out how to subvert it, we implement a new ban. They figure out that ban, then we implement something else. It's just this back and forth cat and mouse game. Do we do that, or do we embrace it? By the time we make that decision, a new technology is already out in the atmosphere. And we're stuck in this cycle, right? And so I'm trying to break this cycle because there's always going to be a new technology. There's always going to be a ChatGPT. There's always going to be a DeepSeek. There's always going to be, fake videos. Maybe I don't know. Deepfakes is what I'm trying to say. Deepfakes. Maybe a year from now, students are using deepfakes to submit presentations, and we don't know about it. Right? It's hard to detect because a year from now, that technology might be even stronger than what it is right now. There's always going to be a new technology. How do we break this cycle? And I think it starts with, again, the stuff that surrounds the technology that we can fix. So let me get to that. Again, in ending student cheating for good requires us to focus on metacognition in classroom culture instead of assuming that students are doing it because they're lazy or because students are going to cheat anyway. The fact of the matter is, when students cheat, they are lacking in some skills, whether it's intrinsic motivation, whether it's time management, whether it is effective goal setting. Like, there are specific skills that if they are using technology to cheat, they're probably lacking in. How can we teach in alignment with those skills instead of punishing them for using the technology to subvert them? Right, that's really what I want to try to emphasize with you all. Okay, I want to lighten it up a little bit because I see our wheels turning. They're turning slow. It's like, this is different. I don't know about this. I want to get to my story. 2019, I studied abroad in Budapest, Hungary. I got there in December, was really excited, was supposed to spend the whole spring semester there. March 2020 happened, I got snatched back. I went from living in a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Central Europe with my girlfriend to now living in my childhood home with my parents and a 10, 11-year-old, right? So really different circumstance. That experience made me figure out that I wanted to pursue education as a career because I was a communication major. I was like, how do I use my communication skills for good and not evil, right? Like, what is the thing that I want to try to solve in society through this? and I reconnected with education. That takes me to Georgetown, where I'm currently a part-time faculty member. I teach a summer education technology course, so I'm always talking with my students about education technology. And I also served at the Center for New Designs and Learning and Scholarship, which is the equivalent of Georgetown's Center for Teaching and Learning, where we do faculty development. So I spent several years there kind of honing my craft. Now I do a lot of stuff independently, currently at Wilmington University in Wilmington, Delaware, as a faculty development specialist. So I kind of split my time between those two areas. 2024, that's me speaking to about 750 students in Maryland's Future Business Leaders of America chapter. I do a lot of work with high school and college students. And then y'all are probably leaning in like, what in the world is that last photo? Is that a meme? What is that? So I love this, right? And I feel like this specifically applies to your traditional faculty member who might be in like their first year of teaching, right? Like heavy on the content. Like they know their stuff. But the student relationship building is the part that takes time to develop. So really that's what I'm here to do. Have us think about how we want to build relationships with students. And I think this is very serendipitous given the weightlifting example that I gave earlier. This is what happens when faculty only bench press. If you bench press too much, this is what's going to happen if you don't focus on other aspects of your teaching. And this is my kind of sales pitch for this keynote. Really three main areas of teaching that I want us to think about today, and I think we have the mental agility to kind of jump back and forth between these and see how they're connected to each other. Wellness pedagogy or wellness-centered instruction, making sure that our students are healthy enough to actually be like physiologically and cognitively capable of reaching the learning goals that we set for them. Because if they're not well, if they're bringing traumas into the classroom that they don't feel supported around, if we're re-traumatizing students, then they're not even going to be able to think about the complex topics that we want them to think about, right? So where does wellness fall into that? Then we got equity-centered teaching. How do we ensure that every student that sits in our classroom, whether their classroom is their living room or like the physical classroom on Tiffin University's campus, how can we make sure that everything that we do is in alignment with their goals, their needs, their interests, no matter what characteristics that they might have. And then the technology literacy piece, which I just described. And I really feel like this is the intersection of where excellent teaching happens in 2025. If I could give some more concrete examples, I've got some studies here. You see the kind of the stuff on the side in terms of the citing. But when wellness pedagogy was integrated into a first-year writing course at like a small private institution, helped students build a sense of community, make content relevant to those students, especially because these were first-year students, kind of had them thinking about what it means to be a first-year student, how to navigate a higher ed institution, and then self-reported improved focus during academic tasks. So these are some of what we gain as a result of focusing on wellness-centered teaching. We look at equity-centered teaching. This was integrated in a junior level human rights course, this specific study. The experimental group scored 15% higher on the final exam in comparison to the control group. And then it increased participation too, so students were more participative and engaged in this class as a result of some of the equity-centered teaching practices. And so again, it shows some of the outcomes that we might be going for. And when we look at technology literacy across K through 20, there was a literature review, so a review of about 45 different academic studies ranging from elementary school technology literacy all the way up to graduate level education. And in each of those studies, there was some sort of significant positive link between technology literacy and academic achievement. And obviously the ways in which educators in those environments integrated technology literacy, it was all different. And so the effect was varied, right? But it gives a sense of no matter where we do this, this can also be powerful and unlock some learning goals for our students. I want to encourage us to think about this as like a pyramid where wellness-centered teaching is the base. Like that's where everything starts. Because if we don't resolve the reasons why students aren't aligning with academic integrity, the reason why students are cheating, then they're going to do it anyway. So how do we solve that through wellness-centered pedagogy? It looks like coping strategies. If you're a student and you're studying at 12:20 p.m. and you have something, well, let's do 11:20 instead of 12:20, because most assignments are due at midnight, right? So, if it's 11:20, you're getting really tired and you're only 50% way through your project, and it's due at midnight, and you don't have another opportunity to submit it. What do you do in that scenario? What guidance do we give students in that specific scenario? Yes, they need to manage their time so that they don't land in the scenario in the first place, but when they're in it, what can we give them so that they're not typing into ChatGPT, write me a 3-paragraph thing about this thing, and write it in this way, and here's 2 examples of my previous work, and make it sound like me. And then they take that and then they enter it into humanized AI, which is literally a platform that takes AI-generated content and makes it sound human. That's what the platform is built to do, right? So students have so many different tools to circumvent the challenges. So let's just eliminate the challenges anyway so that students are actually inspired to learn. That looks like coping strategies, help-seeking behaviors. So when students feel like they're drowning academically, are we setting the precedent for them to come to us and their classmates for help? Are we helping them build relationships with the folks that they're sitting next to in class so that when they need guidance on how to move forward, they run to them instead of the platforms first? So how can we do that? And then academic wellness through metacognition, which I know a lot of you all have already been shared with, talked to about, and we can continue to refine those practices too. And there's some more here: boost intellectual humility when it comes to equity-centered teaching. This is especially for folks who are in this room that might be teaching in the social sciences, that students talking to each other adds to the academic experience. You need students to be able to have thoughtful discussions across ideological differences. Equity-centered teaching helps with that, right? That philosophy helps with that. And then at the very top, once we have a solid foundation for wellness-centered teaching, every student knows that their well-being is actually being cared for by their faculty member. Once every student feels like their thoughts, their cultures, their ideas are welcome and well reflected in their curriculum, that's when we can finally focus on technology literacy. And it would be awesome if, when it comes to technology literacy, we start by teaching students how to learn with the technology. Because so often when we think about AI skills, we think about it in connection to our specific discipline. How are students going to use AI as an accountant? How are students going to use AI as a biologist? How are students going to use AI in insert fields? And we kind of integrate that into our teaching to the extent that we're familiar with. But what if a great starting point might be to introduce students to how to use AI just to study? How to use AI just to outline a paper responsibly, right? Because students are already doing that, but how can we make sure that the intellectual rigor is still built into the assignment while students can still use AI as a tool? So there's an opportunity to teach students how to learn with AI before, or even in alignment with, we can do it simultaneously with the professional skills that we want students to build with AI. All right, I'm gonna keep going here. When it comes to wellness-centered pedagogy, has some stats here. 90% of college professors in a study, I forget what institution this is from. This might be from one of the think tanks that I looked at. But 90% of college professors in this survey said that student mental health is worse now than it was when they first entered the teaching profession. All right, and that says a lot. When we look at the specific markers of decreased mental health that students are experiencing, 37% of students in the National College Health Association's most recent assessment is, 37% exhibited stress, 31% exhibited anxiety, 22% had poor sleep habits, which we already know in this room students are struggling with, and then 21% had depressive symptoms. And again, this was from the American College Health Association. And I had this slide about the state of the global workplace, because so often when I talk to faculty, not even when I talk to faculty, but specifically when I'm just in earshot of faculty conversation, the narrative quickly becomes, my students aren't reading anymore. What is up with today's students? these students are soft, like they can't take feedback, like there's all this stuff about students, how students specifically are struggling with their mental and emotional well-being. And I think it's interesting to kind of look at the big picture in terms of how adults who are well established in their career are doing in terms of their mental and psychological well-being. And so the State of the Global Workplace, which is it's a yearly study that's conducted by Gallup. And so it's a survey, about 140,000 respondents every year to this survey, and there's like 130 countries represented. It's a really broad, sweeping study about the state of the global workplace, but specifically how people are doing. Like, what is their state of mental and psychological well-being in their careers? And it asks this question. Please imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. Suppose we say that the top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, and the bottom of the ladder represents the worst possible life for you. Where would you put yourself on that ladder today? And then where do you see yourself on that ladder 5 years from now? Those are the two main questions that this survey asks. So again, where are you on this ladder now? Where are you on this ladder 5 years from now? This is what came out of it. They used an instrument that sorted the respondents into 3 categories. Either they're suffering, they're thriving, or they're struggling, which was somewhere in the middle based on their responses. 8% of respondents, which accounts for tens of thousands of people around the world, say that they are suffering at work, which means that they will put themselves at a 4 or below on that ladder in terms of satisfaction. 34% are thriving. But then we have this 58% who are struggling, that are somewhere in the middle of an 8 on the ladder to a 4 on the ladder. The folks in the middle were kind of categorized as struggling. So we've got a lot of adults. And even if you disaggregate the data and you look specifically at, okay, how are folks over 35 doing versus folks who are under 35? Because maybe your synopsis is that, we got a lot of young people that are kind of dragging these numbers down. It was 7% of employees under the age of 35 reported that they were suffering, compared to 8% over the age of 35. So we actually have slightly more folks over the age of 35 who say that they're struggling, well, specifically suffering in their careers. And this is helpful context because, again, it's easy to kind of paint a picture of what today's students look like. And this shows that faculty, staff members, university presidents, like the grown adults that make decisions about our students, are likely struggling just as much, but are more quiet about it because it's not within their culture to really talk about it right now. So I feel like this is helpful framing for us to have. When we implement wellness-centered pedagogy, it not only helps our students, but it helps us. And this is because grind culture strips us of our moral agency. If I were to ask you all, and this question is going to come up at some point in this presentation, why should students not use AI to cheat? Or even just the more general questions, why should students not cheat? There'll probably be some sort of moral argument where students have to be responsible over what they say, over what they produce. It's not right to take someone's work and claim it as your own, right? These are some of the arguments that we try to share with our students. This is what our academic integrity statements kind of frame it around. But when grind culture, it strips us of our moral agency, because when you look at the landscape of higher ed today, and you see that researchers are using AI to submit academic work. They're literally publishing AI-generated work. They're getting docked for that. You look at the legal field, folks who are literally like litigating in the courtroom with AI-generated case law that doesn't exist. They're then finding out about it later. These lawyers are getting disbarred. Like, these are the consequences, and the professionals are still doing it though. So we don't want our students to cheat with AI, but we have professionals who are cheating with AI in their work. And this is because of grind culture. It's the pressure to produce, the pressure to always be on, specifically in the academic research piece context. The folks feel like they can't keep up. They gotta publish 10 times a year, 15 times a year, just to keep up with the folks that they're competing for opportunities and grants, research grants for, right? So how can we unpack grind culture for our students so that they're not assimilating into it and they can actually spend time learning and taking in the information that we have for them? And when I think of specific examples for what wellness-centered pedagogy looks like flexible assignment deadlines, for example. Every time I talk about flexible assignment deadlines, I get the response, well, if the assignment deadlines are flexible, that's more work for me as a faculty member, because then I got to check up on where all the students are. And then if I set every Sunday for my grading, and then my student submits something on Tuesday, and then I got to go back on Tuesday and grade the thing, then I'm outside of my grading hours, right? So it's the work-life balance that we try to set for ourselves, which I absolutely believe in. But how do we change the incentive structure so that students understand the risk of turning something in late without penalizing them through a letter grade? Let's see, for me, feedback is a weapon. I give really good feedback, and I say, if you don't submit it by this day, the longer you wait, the less substantive feedback you're going to get from me, which makes your final projects probably less powerful, right? Because I'm a human being. I don't operate at 100% all the time. I can't answer all of your questions all the time. So you have this window, and as an adult, you can make a decision to either shift your schedule to make sure that it's in so that I can give you the feedback, or if not, I'm still going to grade it. Might even use some AI tools to help me grade it more efficiently, but you're not going to get the paragraphs of feedback that I would usually give. And so usually we have this or that framing, like, oh, like if I have flexible assignment deadlines, my work-life balance is going to be out the window. It doesn't have to be necessarily, right? We can be flexible with how we negotiate that with students. And then actually embedding wellness into the curriculum. I helped facilitate a community of practice at Georgetown that helped faculty integrate student well-being topics into their curriculum. So for example, we had business professors who's, instead of just focusing on the final projects, students are creating business plans, let's actually talk about work-life balance for corporate professionals. Let's look at the data. How many hours are working professionals actually spending in corporate America? And then how do we equip ourselves with the skills in order to stay in the profession and persist through it? Right? Because that's a conversation that students also care about. So what are opportunities to connect the wellness pieces of our respective disciplines, right? Because all of them have some sort of element of this, connecting those wellness-related topics and putting them into our curriculum. Okay, so before we get to equity, I've been talking for about 35, maybe 40 minutes straight. I want us to just take a break for a moment. Feel free to sit, clean up your notes if you took any. And then in about 30 seconds or so, I'll ask us to reflect on this question. I want us to delineate, are there things that I've shared that you want to take or table? So is there something that I've said that I want to use that right away, or I really want to pursue that, I want to think about that more? Or if there's something that I said that Jordan, this isn't connecting for me, or I need to table this for a little bit, this sounds good, but I need to look into it a little bit more. What are some of those things, right? And so I want us to take a few moments. We'll take about, I feel like you all just had the 30 seconds maybe right now. Maybe you already have things that you're thinking about, and we'll talk amongst our table mates for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back, do a little bit of share out, and then I'll continue with the presentation. But yeah, reflect on this. If you have specific questions, also ask them of your table mates too. We'll come back together in about 5 minutes. One of my least favorite parts of being a facilitator is breaking up good conversation. But I'm afraid I'll have to do that so we can continue. There's going to be more of a discussion / Q&A at the end, but I am dying to hear what some of you all discuss. So would anyone like to share either something that they already planned to take from this presentation, something that they need to table and think about more, or just another question or thought that was kind of raised in your group that resonated? And don't feel like you have to summarize your whole group's discussion, but just something that resonated with you already that you want to bring to us. Yeah, I can pass the mic to something.
I think we all talked about tabling for a little bit, the flexible deadlines. It's I get the idea, but real life's out there. We got to teach them how do we balance that. So it was interesting, but it's kind of tabled for now. Just got to think about it some more.
And if you don't mind, could you share more about the real life thing? Is it that
flexible deadlines don't prepare students for what real life is going to be like after graduation, or is it really something different?
All business that we
Got it.
Plus, you don't pay the electric bill on time, the lights get turned out.
But that's different. Like there are varying like life problem levels that we're working with. We're talking about class assignments. But I will say, if our students are going to become business leaders, and they might actually hold positions in which they can change the work norms, are we preparing our students to assimilate into the grind culture that I talked about, or are we preparing them to actively change it? I think I've been able to navigate grind culture myself, first generation college student, took out a ton of debt to go to a master's, first black man in my program to ever graduate from my program. I would call myself a pretty hardworking person, but I spend most of my waking hours trying to undo grind culture. And so I kind of operate in that middle space of like, it's not a one extreme or the other, it's where we find that middle ground. But yeah, I appreciate you all sharing that. Yeah, I want to go back to you.
Along with flexible deadlines, it's something that's what I like as a give and take, and I kind of do it already, is that I tell them this is the deadline for the project. I won't take late points off between that deadline and when I get to grading that set of assignments. So it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks. You're gambling here. Like you can submit it after the deadline. I don't care, but you're gambling with whether you're going to get late points off or not, because you don't know when I'm going to grade that. I mean, because then that allows me to it allows them to be late if they need to, just for a couple of days. And it allows me to keep on whatever schedule I'm on for grading, and I don't have to. And then I tell them, if I have to go back in, you submit it after I've graded. Like you see a 0 in the grade book, and I have to go back in and change that 0 to something else, you're risking getting late points off. So it's more of a. So that's the way I use flexible deadlines for them. So there's still a deadline, and they still have to pay the electric bill, but there's a grace period of 10 days, whatever. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Flexibility for you and the students, it sounds like. Yeah. Anyone else want to share as I do a 360 to make sure I see everybody? Sure.
So in this semester, for my social psychology class, I give them a lot of quiz. And then the first half of semester, a lot of them missing quiz. They're missing because they don't pay attention for the deadline. So then a couple of students ask me, because they see their grade from A to D before midterm. So actually I did very nicely. In the midterm exam, I print out how many quizzes they're missing for each individual and let them do the makeup. And after that I say, that's it, no more. Your midterm grade is good. From now on, if you're missing, you're missing. And then now it's like 2 more quiz now. I only see 1 or 2 missing, rather than everybody. So I kind of remind them, but I also kind of show my mean face, say, okay, if you late, I go in and put 0 there. And I think it's kind of working. Hopefully, that's just my example up to this time.
I could probably use some work using my mean face. So I might have to pick some stuff from you. But I mean, to me, it makes me think about the importance of scaffolding assignments, or at the very least providing multiple opportunities for students to submit stuff. Because I speak to a lot of faculties, even still, that have it's midterm and final and nothing else. And so what are the gaps in between that, so that students are not only refining their skills, but they get a sense of the flow of the class and what the expectations are, so that it's not the midterm, that's that wake-up call, but it's happening a little earlier. So I appreciate you sharing that. Any other items folks felt passionate about, wanted to share?
I think it was interesting that, and I teach psychology, so of course this is interesting to me, but I thought it was interesting, trauma-informed teaching, because in my conversations with students, they literally will say, I'm so anxious and overwhelmed, I literally can't think. And it's just shutting down my cognition, particularly around homework. And that's when one of the things I've instituted this semester is kind of an academic wellness assessment. It includes things like, do you attend class? Do you take notes? But there's also components of their wellness. Are you able to have a balanced, existence? Are you good at time management? A lot of different areas. And then after the midterm, when many students aren't doing well, and I make everyone take the assessment, it's based on variables in the literature that predict academic achievement. I have them create an academic wellness plan for extra points, right? And this is, let's talk about what strategies are you going to use based on your weaknesses of this assessment. The only thing I'm struggling with is, because it's optional, the ones that need it the most are the ones that weren't doing it, and they could have gotten 10 extra points to bump up their midterm grade. So I'm like, okay, do I need to make this mandatory, or perhaps?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We're finding a way to bring it to students' doorstep, have some sort of discussion about it or something like that. But yeah, it sounds like you're already doing a lot in terms of academic wellness. I had a thought connected to that, but I lost it. I'll try to get it back at some point before we leave. Any others before we move forward? Didn't want to miss the thought that was like burning for somebody that they won't have 20 minutes from now. Yeah.
So my thought was dealing with technology and AI. I work in technology and AI, and I was teaching this semester, and I was making a statement that I traditionally make every semester. And as I'm making this statement, I'm realizing that because of technology, the statement is no longer true. And the result of what the students can do a year ago would have been science fiction. So then I start thinking, well, am I needed? And I think about self-preservation. And I think a lot of times the human side of us kind of put up those boundaries. This is the way things are going to be, just because. And it's just kind of amazing how fast things are moving.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Definitely a lot to think about there. I did remember the thing that I said I wanted to remember, and I had a follow-up question for my gentleman here, and you can just answer out loud. The survey that you gave to students, was that a pre-course survey? So was that at the very beginning of class, or when did you introduce that sort of reflective assessment on their academic?
It was right after the midterm.
Right after the midterm. Okay, got it. Yeah. So it talks about the different stages at which we can get students to reflect on their academic wellness. We've also talked to several faculty who have a pre-course survey to try to learn as much about their students as possible. Are you playing a sport? How many classes are you taking? When do you study? When do you have time to work in groups? If we do group work, can I base you off of your availability to meet with each other instead of doing it random and then half the group can't meet with each other, right? How much information can we get from our students at the very beginning and then teach in alignment with that? It requires some agility from us, actually make the changes with the information that we receive from students, but it's the act of receiving it earlier as opposed to later, similar to your point about those introductory quizzes, so that it wakes students up to what their engagement might look like in that class to have them practice that. So thank you all for sharing. We'll have a little more time to speak about this stuff at the end. I wanted to segue into equity-centered teaching, which, if I had to define it, it's instruction that addresses systemic inequities in education by ensuring all students, especially marginalized groups, have equal opportunities for academic success. And this can be implemented at the content level, the climate level, and the pedagogical level. So when we talk about our content, our students' lived experience, the lived experiences that our students have reflected in the readings that they have, the TED Talks that we have them watch, or whatever, video elements, is it reflected in the personal narratives that we have them read, whatever our content looks like, how do we align that with the experiences that students are interested in? And that's something that we can even gather in the pre-course survey. So if we give a survey to our students, asking them, how do you like to learn? What is the best way that you use to receive information? Also, what are the problems in society that you care about solving? That's one of the things that I ask my students, so that the examples and the scenario-based assignments that I give to students are reflective of the problems that they want to solve in education technology, not problems that I'm always imposing on them. Obviously, I introduced a lot to them, but I want them to introduce me to what they're interested in too. Another thing that's not in the slide deck, but I just thought about it and I think it's important, names and pronouns are so important when it comes to equity-centered teaching, and it's usually an afterthought because it's really hard to do. If you have a class of 30 students, it's hard to remember those 30 students' names. And I'm a professional speaker. I'm talking to students all the time. It goes in one ear and out the other. It's awful. And like I have a really hard time remembering names. For my first couple of classes, students wear name tags. It helps me, but it also helps them because when they talk in groups and when they talk in pairs, they get to literally see their classmates' names. So that by week 5, week 6, they have an idea of what all their names are. And the same goes for pronouns, right? One of the worst things that we can do in terms of equity-centered teaching is not honoring the pronouns that students come into class with, how they want to be identified and referred to. And so these are, these are things that are easy logistically, but challenging to actually like grasp and to practice, religiously and continuously. But those are 2 areas of equity-centered teaching that are also huge too. Just making sure students feel like they belong and that their identities are valued in the classroom. I think this slide is so interesting. This is one of several studies that shows that when people are sleep deprived, they literally cannot empathize with other people. And if we want students to build relationships with each other, if we value the connections that students are building among each other in the classroom, even the chemistry that they build in terms of discussions and bouncing off of each other's ideas, they need empathy for that. Especially for our courses where we're getting them to think about perspectives that are not their own and to practice that intellectual humility. They need empathy to do that, and if they're exhausted, they don't have the capacity to employ that empathy. So it's something for us to consider. And when it comes to discussions that we facilitate, I'm hoping that we can move from just being an expert, right, for some of you who might have a lecture taking up 90 to 95% of your instructional time, moving from being an expert to being an expert who facilitates. You might facilitate every now and again, you're refining your facilitation skills, to then becoming an expert facilitator. And that's the progression that I hope you all are kind of empowered to take as a result of this talk. Because I tell my students all the time, because I teach an education technology course, and I tell them, you all know more about education and what works well in the classroom collectively than I do individually. And that's true because you all are in the classroom every single day. And you're around students who are also in the classroom every single day. I only see y'all when I get booked to speak and when I teach my 3-week class in the summer. So I'm not nearly in the classroom as much as you are. How can we talk to our students so that they also feel their expertise as well, right, and really empower them? Great example of this is guiding principles. This is not ground rules for class. Ground rules are usually things that we come up with, the students don't necessarily agree with them, they have no feedback loop to provide feedback on those ground rules, and it feels like it feels rigid in its structure. Grounding principles actually come from students, and students help determine how class can run smoothly. And this is huge for, again, discussion, classes that are heavy in discussion and collaboration. There's a quote by Diana Eck, which my colleague, Rabbi Rachel at Georgetown University, kind of remixed. Diversity is a fact, but pluralism is a practice. So if we have the diversity in the room, we have no control over the diversity in our rooms. Students are enrolling at Tiffin University all the time. We get the students that walk in and that register. But what we do have control over is the sense of pluralism. Does every student in the classroom feel like they have a voice, have a perspective to share, and are equipped to share that perspective with respect? And that's the huge piece that we can think about. So how do you actually do this? How do you actually set grounding principles so that when class facilitation is facilitated, it goes smoothly? You can start with a prompt like this. Think about a classroom conversation you've had that was productive. What about that conversation made it productive? This is something that you can ask students in week 1 of the class, when usually it's just an intro class, you might be going over your syllabus. Like, this is a great time to get this kind of information in, because like the class really starts going in weeks 2, 3, and 4. Then in week 1, you can have them respond to this in a 3-minute free write, just on their own, thinking about their own academic experiences, what's worked well for them, and then they answer the opposite. So name a classroom conversation that didn't work well for you. or that you felt like was unproductive or unhelpful. What about that was unproductive or unhelpful? And students start naming specific things. There was no agenda or no topic. There was no learning goal attached to the discussion, so I didn't feel like it was helpful. There was one person who dominated the discussion, and the faculty member couldn't help but call on that one student. Why? Because they hated awkward silences. They couldn't let things just sit. And they couldn't tell Tom, I appreciate your enthusiasm, thank you, but I want to hear from some of the other voices in the room. I'm going to just let things sit for a little bit and let us think about it. We can come back in 2 minutes once everyone's had the chance to gather their thoughts. And so it gives us cues for what we can practice, but it also gives the students cues. They share information with each other about what works best for their engagement. Because ideally, they're going to be talking to each other more than they talk to us. That's how I like to structure my class. So I want to make sure that students are well equipped to talk to each other. And then you point out the major themes. What major themes do we see? Folks will raise their hand. They'll share some of the examples that I just shared. Those major themes, as you write them on the board or as you type them up, in a Google Doc or whatever, those themes turn into statements. And now you have a list of 5 to 7 statements that are the grounding principles for the class. You can add those statements to your syllabus. And now you have a foundation for, okay, Jordan's ed tech class, this is how we operate. This is what the expectations are. This is how we facilitate helpful class discussion. If Jordan isn't living up to that, I could call him out on it and say, Mr. Davis, it's in the syllabus that we usually do this. We haven't been meeting that. What can we do as a class to kind of pursue something that's in alignment with the guiding principles? And this is an active tool. This isn't just a static thing that we add to our syllabus and the students forget about it and we forget about it. One faculty that I actually was in a class with, so one of my professors, before we dived into a challenging conversation, because she wanted us to think about the war in Gaza for this particular topic. This was in October of 2023 when the hospital bombing first happened that kind of made, international, shockwaves around it. She showed the guiding principles that we set in week 1. This was like week 7, week 8, middle of the semester, October. And she's like, I want us to get in small groups and think about how well we've been honoring these guiding principles. Are we actually doing the things that we set out to do in week 1? And if not, what can we do to change that? And we had really constructive dialogue about having really constructive dialogue. So can we have students with have conversations with students about having conversations so that those conversations are more fruitful, they're more productive. Students are able to more critically think because the logistics of it and the cultural, foundation of it is set by them. And it's something that they can take pride in and feel proud of. Anybody have any questions about this specific practice? I know I got hyper specific on this. Any clarifying questions in relation to this that folks do? All right, cool. If they come up later, let me know to keep things rolling. All right, technology literacy. Technology is not just AI. It's obviously a ton of different things. We talk about the cameras that are in the corners of classrooms and the learning tools that are not AI that students can use. But I specifically like to focus on phones because some people have equated phones to a literal appendage of today's students. It's connected to their body and it cannot be severed, no matter how hard we try. And the phone things is so interesting to me as an equity-centered educator because this is one of those things where I literally see both sides of it and I don't really know where I stand on it. There are some faculty in this learning community that I facilitated at Georgetown that I talked about earlier. Faculty that care so much about students' well-being that they're willing to dedicate a whole module of their course on student well-being. They're teaching chemistry. And they care so much about it, they're like, no, we need a whole class on this. These are the folks that I have the privilege of speaking with. At the same time, they're also banning phones from the classroom. I'm like, that's interesting. It seems like we're in alignment on our educational philosophies. Where is this coming from? Faculty are saying that not only are students able to build deeper relationships with each other when the phone isn't in their view, but they actually appreciate the phone ban because no one else is telling them to put the phone down. The notifications aren't telling them to put the phone down. Their friends aren't telling them to put the phone down. So when they have an adult that they care about, that's telling them to put the phone down. That it might hurt for the first couple of weeks, but then students start to get used to it. But then on the other hand, to play the other side of it, if we think about just like world history and countries that have infiltrated other countries and have kind of ripped them from their resources, have stolen their language, have really devastated the countries that they've infiltrated, we would call that colonialism, right, in a lot of different contexts. If we call our students digital natives, that's a term that's floating around, and we take the communication device that is native to them, I'm not calling that colonialism, but I can see how one could draw the parallels. This is how students communicate in 2025. This is the thing that they use for storytelling. I was talking to one faculty member who he teaches, he's an Italian professor, so it's a language course. And this conversation happened in about April. It was like, Jordan, can you connect me with the library? Because this summer, I want to learn how to edit videos in Adobe Premiere Pro so that I can then teach my students how to edit videos so that they can practice their storytelling around the Italian language. I'm like, wow. One, that's super inspiring, but two, that's way too much work that's unnecessary. Students literally have apps in their phone where they can edit videos in 5 minutes that they're already familiar with. Like, they're already digital storytellers in their phone. So why take several hours out of your summer to learn a platform that you don't even use or are familiar with to then teach your students? Again, it's back to the learning goals. The learning goals are pure. You want your students to be storytellers and to use the Italian language to utilize a skill that's going to be used after graduation. That's the learning goal. But the ways that we reach those learning goals, technology could be a really helpful tool in that. Because students can create a 3-minute TikTok video about a real-world issue that's happening in Italy that doesn't take them the 28 hours to learn Adobe Premiere Pro and then edit the video in a 17-week semester. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Like, does that resonate with people? Right? And so the phone thing is tricky. My answer to that, because again, I see the equity-centered part of it, but I also see kind of like the, I'm the faculty member and I'm ruling over my students part of it. Is just have the conversation with our students. Now, I've been asking you all to talk to your students about a lot of things, but this is what week 1 is for. Like, I've been in so many week 1 courses, like as a recent college grad myself, I graduated undergrad in 2021. So when I've been sitting in these week 1 courses, we spend 30 minutes going over the syllabus and then we leave early. It's like it's a 90-minute class and we had, all of this great time to kind of set up the class and make sure that everyone is on the same page. And week 2, the class is normal, it's mostly lecture. But how can we use that week 1 to really set the foundation for our students and to really integrate their feedback so that the learning is helpful to them? Because whether we like it or not, we are constantly in negotiation with our students. We're negotiating their time, their attention, their effort. Our classes don't work without those things that come from our students. So how can we have that conversation in the beginning to set that up? Okay, why should students care about AI ethics? Really see that there's 4 main arguments. There's the moral argument, right? It's not right to take somebody's work and claim it as your own. That's one argument. Then there's the punitive argument. If you don't exercise academic integrity here, you're going to take those same bad habits into the workplace and you're going to get disbarred. You're going to get fired. Right? Someone's going to catch you in the act. And it's the punishment that is then the incentive not to do it. But then there's these other 2 arguments around accuracy. I mentioned an example earlier about how 2 newly minted lawyers used ChatGPT to come up with case law that didn't exist, and they didn't check their sources, and it was wrong, and they got disbarred as a result of that. That's an accuracy issue, though. So the AI wasn't accurate, it didn't provide the accurate information. But sometimes AI does provide accurate information. It's technically sound, it's got all the right data, it's got all the right facts in it, but there's still something off about it. Because I talk to a lot of faculty now and they're like, I have the skills as a faculty member to read a paper and to tell instantly whether it's AI generated or not. Because I've seen it so many times and I've used it myself, and often what the AI generates is so generic that it's easy to see through it. Like I can tell that this, a 5-paragraph essay, this 1 paragraph was AI generated. Everything else was human generated, I can tell that, but there's something off about this 1 paragraph. That speaks to the effectiveness piece of it. Because if we can tell that our students are using AI in the classroom, the employers might not realize it, but the folks that are going to be engaging with what students produce in their professions, they're going to see through it. And so it's messing with the effectiveness of their work. Speaking at a table right here, how do we, what is the thing that humans provide that AI can't? What is the thing where we read a paper and we say, this thing is missing? I can tell it's AI generated because it doesn't have this thing. Gentleman right here said critical thinking, right? That's one of the issues, is that AI still has a lot of room to grow in terms of critical thinking, in terms of forming creative arguments that are actually sound. But then where's the personal experience in it? Right? Like if an AI can't make up my life. An AI probably couldn't have put this presentation together because someone would have to prompt AI to connect these 3 things that most people aren't connecting. And that comes from my personal experience. And I feel like that's the magic that I hold in the rooms that I operate. And so that's, these last 2 arguments for why students should use AI responsibly are the ones that I think are the strongest. There's always going to be a moral argument that we're going to try to pose to students to be respectful of their peers and the folks that are in the field. That might not always land. There's always going to be the punitive argument, but that's in the future. I'm just trying to get a grade right now. I don't care as much about the disbarring thing. Yeah, it happens every now and again, but I'm willing to take that risk because I need this grade right now. But the other 2 arguments, the accuracy argument, that your information can be wrong and that it could be ineffective, like you're not actually going to solve the problem that you think you're solving with AI. I think those are the strongest arguments that we have that we can then pose to our students. So hopefully I armed someone with how we can explain academic integrity to our students. And again, this is not something that we necessarily tell them explicitly, but we have the discussion about it. At some point in the 17-week, 18-week semester, we find a time to allow students to reflect on that. I love the academic wellness assessment that students take. Questions like these can kind of be integrated into those types of assessments. All right, so as I end here, I want to remind us of our pyramid. I'm encouraging you all to consider the wellness piece. Like, why are we actually here? Why are we teaching our students to do anything? It's because we have big problems in the world that we want to solve. If our students aren't utilizing their skills outside of the classroom, those problems won't get solved. Therefore, people are going to suffer as a result. And so the human suffering piece of it is actually where we need to start. Creating an environment to where students don't feel like they're suffering. Then is the equity-centered teaching piece. So if students have a social justice orientation to the work that they're doing, if students see each other as thought partners, as peer collaborators, that strengthens the learning goals for everybody. It literally raises the ceiling because 2 ideas put together are better than just one. And so we cultivate those student relationships. And then lastly, technology literacy. So teaching students how to use AI for their learning, then teaching students how to use AI in their practice. Call to action. All right, so if you take anything from this presentation, like, Jordan, what next steps do I have? It's to develop the following statements for your fall courses. So fall 2025, we've got some time. A wellness statement. How do you plan to promote student well-being? Not Tiffin University. Tiffin University probably has some sort of student well-being statement. Tiffin University probably has some sort of equity statement. It probably has some sort of academic integrity statement. And what faculty do is they take that, they copy it, and they paste it into their syllabus, and students know it's not genuine because they didn't come up with it. So you're telling me something that the institution required you to put in, but you didn't take the time out to make it personal to what my experience in your class is going to be. So how can we take those statements that the university provides as templates and to alter them to make specific commitments to students about how we're going to serve their needs in these 3 areas? that's what I want us to work on over the next couple of months. And I counted how many days we had. We have exactly 150 days from today to do this. Just 3 statements. Because the statements turn into commitments and the commitments turn into actions. It starts with us meaning the statements that we put in our syllabus. We have 150 days until the last Monday in August, where it's, I think, the second last or last Monday in August, where it's the official start of the fall semester. So we've got time to build this out. And then hopefully as a result, when we make these commitments to our students, we then align our teaching with those commitments, and we start to change some things. We start to integrate some of those vanilla wafers in the banana pudding that I've tried to, sprinkle in throughout this keynote. Here's my bibliography. Y'all don't need to see that. I have a feedback form. This is a fairly new keynote, so I'm still prototyping. I'm still trying it out. Would love to hear how this was helpful for you and how I can make this work better. So I really just want us to sit for a moment. This should only take about 2 minutes to complete this feedback survey. And again, if you want the slides from this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to get them once you fill this out. So I'm gonna let folks do that for a couple seconds. Okay, yeah. I just learned, Stacy told me very kindly, that we are over time. So if you need to leave, please leave, do what you need to do. We'll love folks who can stay to fill out the feedback survey. I deeply enjoyed speaking to you all today. There are business cards and pens over on that table if you want to choose one. Again, both of them are very glossy. Please take them. My name is Jordan Davis. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate you.